the meeting to order. Peter Strauss did indicate he was coming. Do you want to wait a couple minutes or should we just start right in? What's everybody's
I
pleasure?
think we should start in so we don't tie
Okay.
everybody up.
So the first order of business is approving the minutes from the March 9th. And just will note that at the bottom of the night, it says that we're going to be meeting again tentatively on March 30th, but that tentative meeting did not happen because it was decided that at this point, the pause in our work should extend through the summer because we just were not getting any responses from the not-for-profits. They were entering into their busy summer season, and we decided that if we wanted to communicate with them, we should wait till the fall. They're still in their recuperation mode.
I think with respect to the minutes, I would make a motion that the minutes be approved with the revisions with the omission that was proposed, that we delete.
Okay, it's moved and second. The minutes be accepted, provided that we delete the PS. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, so good, done. So the next item is to review the status and the makeup of the committee and the timing for reactivating our work. So we had, we're 4 on the committee now. We had thought we would have a 5th member. The one person that we did, was Bronley Boyd. Have a seat,
There he
Peter.
is.
I was here before 4. Every door was locked except that one.
That's all right, not to worry. We've approved the minutes of the last meeting and otherwise we're just getting started.
Okay.
Do you have a copy of the agenda?
I'll take another one, thanks.
Okay, we're on item 2. So, excuse me, we're on item 3. So the question is what is our current status and is it time to continue? And all this is in mind that we're scheduled to meet with the Board of Selectmen a week from today to give a report and to just sort of, if it's the will of the Select Board and of this committee to try to wrap this up, then we'll proceed accordingly. So I would suggest that we hold on discussion of expanding the committee until we cross that threshold a week from today. And that we discuss today, presuming that we are going to move forward, what would be the logical steps. Does that make sense to people?
I would add a comment, Tom, that we're coming out of the COVID. Yes, we may have a very difficult flu year, okay? Yet this could be an opportune moment to activate what we're trying to accomplish, because obviously the not-for-profits are trying to build their way out also, and they're trying to make a comeback from the COVID issue. So I'm not sure we should put this on the back burner. I think we should be more reflective of their needs and continue the efforts.
I'm sure we should not put this on the back burner. That is, the nonprofits that run events, Tanglewood, Kripalu, Norman Rockwell Museum, Chesterwood, so forth, have had an active year. They've been getting revenue. They may not be quite as much revenue as they would have got in other years, and our approach to them can certainly reflect an acceptance of that. I was really struck looking over the records of past participation that by and large, except for Kripalu, which stopped paying during the course of, by and large, those organizations have not been cooperating with Pilot since it was begun in 2012. And
So
they-
just a quick timeout. You're saying that pilot began in 2012.
that's what I see in the financial records.
Well, there have been contributions in lieu of taxes that go
right.
prior to that.
Oh, well,
I
fine.
think that those records are for the last decade, but it's not back to the beginning
Oh,
of
well,
any.
okay, so even longer.
Yes.
And I noticed in Boston that the BSO, for example, is really generous with Boston. They can afford to be generous with us. They've been paying zero. And it seems to me we ought to get on the ball and hopefully raise a fair amount of revenue for the town.
Okay.
Right, and I agree that we move forward. And I agree with Jay. I think we have a couple of different tasks to deal with, and one is obviously the questionnaire and dealing with nonprofits, but also putting together and quantifying what the financial value is of those services that the town does provide. So I think that's a wholly separate track, and these two things can be going on in tandem. And then to go before the select board and basically give them some kind of an outline of how we want to move forward.
You could do an analytical study of several of the pilots to figure out what the cost is. I mean, we're talking about police, fire, there's a whole host of things. Obviously, there's an issue with water and sewer. We do supply that too. And, these are quantifiable.
Right, well, we have that information.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's just a matter of garnering all the information, bringing it together.
Exactly.
And doing some analysis and pretty much codifying it, putting it into a spreadsheet to say, here's what we're looking at in terms of the overall cost. And then how do we determine how much any nonprofit might be responsible for? What would be reasonable to ask?
Okay, so I tend to agree with the three of you. In my opinion, we've been going a long time, especially Jay and myself. And, it's time to get it done.
Yeah.
Time to write up a report, finish what we've done, and then submit it to the Board of Selectmen, and then it's up to them. So I think there is a consensus here that when we report to the Select Board next week, we're going to express this opinion. And we want I think we'll be seeking some reassurance that the board as a whole is supportive of what we're doing and will take our work seriously. And I think for me personally, it's, we're all busy but we've invested a lot. But if we are going to be submitting this report and doing a good job with it, we want some assurance that the current Board of Selectmen is behind it and they're supportive of what we're doing. And, no guarantees, but I think if we have that kind of assurance, that will provide us with the motivation to really try to do the best we can. Does that make sense to you, Mike, in terms of our request to the Board of Selectmen?
Yeah. I have never heard any negativities from the Board of Selectmen. The only slight difference of opinion is we've had a couple, a couple of members come and go, over the past years on the pilot committee, okay? But as far as the select board, there has never been no support from the select board to the best of my
I
knowledge.
have felt the support, but I've also felt that people are not sure, this is a very different situation than it was, I'll get you in a minute, Peter, a very different situation than it was 5 years ago when we started, and that some people are saying that in today's atmosphere, for instance, Boston would never have gotten their pilot program through. Northampton tried to get it through and was largely unsuccessful. So it's going to be a challenging job to get one. And I've heard some skepticism that maybe it's still not a great time in terms of not-for-profits still trying to get their footing. But that said, I do feel that we should move forward. Yes, Peter.
So two things. One is, I think in moving forward, we should move forward in the context of this is continuity, not this is something new.
Absolutely.
And so for that reason, it's not entirely clear to me that the town meeting is going to be required to deal with it, because we've had this program, we've been collecting payments in lieu of taxes for however long, and it's not new. But also, in talking to the select board, I would not focus on, you've used the word report several times. I would not focus on that, because the next step in what the select board needs to be.
I'm sorry, you would not focus.
I would not focus on the idea of a report, because the next step, which will be complicated, and I suppose involve all of us in some time to the extent that there are personal negotiations involved or conversations involved, will be not only getting the questionnaire out, but encouraging responses to the questionnaire, which will then put us in a position where we can give a report. So I would frame the discussion next Thursday in terms of questionnaire more than in terms of report.
Okay, so just a couple items on what you mentioned, Peter. First of all, from day one, we've known that to institute a pilot program does not require a vote of the town meeting.
Correct.
We had envisioned having a non-binding motion that would express the will of the town, but it's not something that would require a town vote meeting. Am I correct on this?
Right, it's a voluntary program.
It's a voluntary program. There has been efforts in Boston to have legislation that would make pilot programs mandatory, but that enabling legislation has never even gotten out of committee.
That's not a good idea.
Not a good idea.
In terms of the report, I think it's always useful in setting up a timeline to know what the final step will be. And from day one, the final step, the final phase of this committee will be to submit the report. But I do agree with you that the focus needs to be on the next steps.
I would build on what Peter said and phrase it just a little differently. I think we should have a summation as to where we are at this particular point, and then develop a business plan with a series of objectives, okay? They don't have to be the most comprehensive and complicated, but we have a series of objectives so that we have to meet certain positive steps as we go along. And if we don't, then how does that ultimately affect the end game? We need a business plan.
Right.
Or whatever you want to call it.
I do think it's extremely important that we actually.
Peter's a professor. He'll put it in professorial terms.
That in conjunction with this questionnaire, which an awful lot of emphasis has been placed on this questionnaire over the years. I think it's equally, if not more important, to actually try to put together some quantifiable data
Yep.
that we can then work from. And then also maybe brainstorm, are there any other ways to approach this problem?
So in terms of the
I've
quantifiable,
got one idea.
let me just answer if I could. In terms of the quantifiable data, David is, as our intern, and we still have a budget to pay you a fee, a very modest fee, but very worthwhile. We hardly used your services at all last year, but you were very modest in the hours you put in. But will you be available to help work with Roxanne and Peter and
I think
others?
so, as long as it doesn't turn into too large of a project. I'm
I'm
fine with
sorry?
it. As long as it doesn't get too big. There's always that scope creep thing that goes on. If it does get too big, I'll stand up and tell anybody I can't
Okay,
handle it. But for now, yeah, I'm good to go.
okay,
In
so
terms of quantifiable data, Roxanne, there's a kind of data which I would suppose is immediately available. How much does the town expend annually on water, on
Correct.
police, on fire?
Correct.
But
Admissions to these nonprofits?
no, let me finish,
Right.
please. But from the perspective of the nonprofits, their use is going to vary enormously. The BSO, I think, has a fair amount of usage of the Stockbridge Police Force. I don't know that their interest in fire and water is going to be terribly high.
EMS.
Other places have this or that. So for me, I think the Boston approach, which is in effect to assume that you produce community values. So let them say how much community value they produce. 25% of what would be the normal assessment rate, and then you get up to half of that just to reflect your community values, and the other half is what we ask of you. And that doesn't require quantifiable data in quite the same sense.
Well, when I say that, it's not just fire, police, et cetera. They also use our infrastructure. So we're talking about, yes, they produce value for the community,
Right.
but they're also bringing a lot of people here who are utilizing our roads, our bridges, et cetera. So I think you really need to look at the infrastructure cost. What does it take to maintain our town? What is a typical annual budget, for those types of things, including EMS and including fire and police and so on? And take a look at that, because I think there's a point counterpoint in that.
So I have a suggestion that we try to put down on paper just what quantifiable data we're looking for. Maybe you could do a first draft, run it by Peter and Jay and Mike and me, and then we'll try to sort of agree that this is indeed the data we want, and then to bring David into this and say, okay, David, this is what we're looking for. Here are your sources for information. Could you put this into some kind of spreadsheet for us?
Sure.
And by the way, Patrick is really expert, as you know, on spreadsheets, and he might be able to offer.
One suggestion, as you're approaching these, I'm sure these organizations have insurance or carry liability insurance on fire and injuries and such. What would their insurance policy look like if you pulled your Stockbridge EMS services out of this thing, or you prohibited your fire department from going and putting out a fire at their Tanglewood facilities?
So I think that's an
course, we can't
excellent
do that.
suggestion, and that
why would you?
could very well be some useful data.
Yeah.
Mike?
No, I mean, I really don't understand that logic of saying that we're not gonna
No, I'm not
Possibly they
suggesting
did.
that you can actually do that, but I'm just saying, if you're looking at what the value is of services,
But I don't think that's a true bet.
if there wasn't
So
One second, Michael.
probably, I think the starting point, and we could do it internally here, is first of all, you take some of the basic services, police, and I know you're saying some organizations use police more like Tanglewood, but they actually pay when they're holding their concerts, unlike general police. Because if I remember right, from what Boston's did is you take the EMS, you take the police, you take the fire, you take all the services, plowing the roads, all that, and say, here's the cost. It's X percentage of our budget. Your assessment of your property is X. If 30% of our budget is this, then this gives you a number where to come to start from, if you want us to look at it that way.
I don't actually, that's not my understanding of what Boston does. My understanding of what Boston does is they take the value of the organization's property.
Right.
And one question we have to decide, or that's appropriate to think about and might help in dealing with resistance that could otherwise arise, is whether, like Boston, we've set a minimum assessment value below which we don't bother with telling people you really ought to be contributing to pilot. In Boston, that's $15 million. It's not going to be $15 million here, but if it was $1 million or $2 million, we would still pull in Chesterwood and Tanglewood and all those other organizations.
So
And
we have.
I'll finish.
I think it's a little premature to have.
It's
criteria.
premature. It's also a subject that we've discussed extensively before. And if you look at Stockbridge, there are some not-for-profits that are relatively small, but donate generously in a pilot.
Yeah. So where was I going? My understanding of the Boston program is that they take the assessed value of the real estate and they multiply it by 25%, or they reduce it to a quarter. And then they say, okay, your tax on this quarter of the assessed value of your real estate would have been X. You can get credit for the community values that you provide up to 1/2 of X. And the rest we ask you to pay as pilot. That's
Just slight correction on what you just said. It's actually 1/2. And
Okay.
then they're asked to pay 1/4 in cash, and the other quarter can be in community services.
or is assumed, I think it basically is assumed to be.
I think we should not lose sight of the fact that everything doesn't evolve around Boston. And I am a Boston native, okay? But basically, there were cities that have pilots like Worcester, okay? And David can ferret out some of these things. And we can get a broad base of criteria that they use and then apply it to our situation, whatever we decide as a committee.
I completely agree with you that we should, Boston is certainly a model that we can look at. We've looked into Boston model thoroughly. I've had phone interviews with the people who run the program. We've discussed the details. Specifically, we've talked about the Boston Symphony Orchestra agreement. But I think essentially we're going to do what's best for Stockbridge, and we're going to look at models across the Commonwealth.
Correct.
And certainly Boston is a very important one, especially because the BSO has a pilot in Boston.
I would say especially because there are public records about it. And one of the things that David really could do for us, if he's willing to do, is to find whether there are other organizations with pilot programs that have records on the web
Well, Northampton has records on the web and they are vastly inferior, for lack of better, vastly inferior, been much less successful than Boston. So if we want to pull Boston and say, this is gold standard, then some other organization, one of the nonprofits could look at Northampton and say, well, this is where we want to go. And Northampton is essentially nothing. Boston's been fairly
I think
successful.
that's fair, but
I'm not sure that's a fair, I'm gonna side with Jay and say we need to look at Stockbridge, not Boston. The only
Well,
place
he's-
that Boston
And I-
is,
he's saying, look at,
For
he's
a
saying,
second,
look
I
at
do have a
Worcester.
question.
Worcester, I know, has a pilot program, so.
Roxanne has a question.
Based on the last minutes of the March 9th meeting, it says that you would be reaching out to Smitty Pignatelli for additional information from his office to see if he can provide similar pilot efforts. So has that happened?
that has not happened. I have not had a response. I reach out. I'm sure they have more important things to do than on their list, especially with elections coming up and such, than looking at past pilot programs. But I don't want to make excuses for them. I have not seen any response.
David, they asked that I was
Excuse
trying to
me,
make.
Mike has his hand up.
Yeah. The ask that I was trying to make was not how successful are other cities, and I understand that there's, or towns, there's going to be a great deal of variation. But are there descriptions of the program?
Right.
Corresponding for other places? Corresponding
Yes.
description of, that gives.
We have those, they're available on the website. Tom may have in the, if he's still carrying the archives around, you probably have copies of it, of the
Yep.
Northampton agreement with you.
I
you
don't
actually
have it with me,
done
but we do have the Northampton pilot,
There's a-
the report that was passed, and we have the Boston, and we've had interviews with both. And we've also had discussions with other communities in Berkshire County,
I think Williamstown was on the list at one point.
Williamstown, Lenox, Great Barrington. We've talked extensively with those communities about, with the idea that, if we're all doing this together, there might be a little bit more momentum. But case of Lenox, the feeling was, well, they already get significant fees from Tanglewood. That's one community that both in water and sewer and in police detail. And essentially, they have a fairly good relationship with the other not-for-profits, and they're not of a mind to have a pilot program in Lenox. Similarly, in Williamstown, it happens the biggest player there is, of course, Williams College. It happens that Williams College is the biggest taxpayer in Williamstown because they own quite a lot of property that's not strictly educational. And they have made numerous gifts to the town for the schools, for the police department, and other services. So they're not of a mind to do a pilot either. So in some ways, for Berkshire County, we're sort of breaking
Ahead of the
new
game.
ground.
We're ahead of the game.
Have we
Ahead of the
looked
game.
for any other similar destination towns that might have looked at pilot, i.e. on the Cape? Is there any place that's also a popular tourist area that might be in the same boat as us? I can understand
Great
Lenox,
Barrington.
because Lenox, as opposed to Stockbridge, most of the Tanglewood property, for instance, is in Stockbridge.
Correct.
However, Lenox gains the business. They have commercial success. This feeds their commercial businesses. It does not feed ours. So we're in a very different situation from them, and I can understand their point of view. But I'm wondering if there are any other similar communities
Well,
in
arguably,
the
it
Commonwealth or in New
feeds-
England.
Yeah, it's a very good suggestion, and I think that's something we can definitely look into more, Roxanne.
Michael?
So I was just going to get back to, because we looked at it in North Adams, a pilot program, and we based it off of trying to do it on the Pittsfield. We came up with the model. So when they came up with the original 50%, it was that they estimated close to 50% of all the utilities, of all the services that Boston provides, directly benefits the nonprofits. So they got that number back. Then they said you could get the credits and the other stuff. So when we looked at it, what I'm saying is we could very easily do that here and say, these are the services that are provided to everybody, whether you're a nonprofit or not, fire, police, highway, all this. Ones that get taken out of that are the schools. Ones that get taken out of there are utilities. So when we talk about like Lennox getting water and sewer, well, that's a utility. Even though it's run by a town, it's a utility. You pay for the service, you pay for the water, you pay for the other stuff, so that's out. And then like detail rate and stuff, that's directly paid to cover a cost. So those are slightly different, but we could very easily here do that, come up with that percentage, the assessor's office has the value of the nonprofits. And then that would at least get you, so especially because one of the first things asked, and I remember reading this in the Boston one, because they have quite a bit, and David, please feel free to jump in here, but they talk about the rationale behind how you got to where you're asking them to pay. And the simpler we can make it, that it's very simple. These are services that we feel like, regardless of why you're here, you benefit from having fire, you benefit from having a highway department, you benefit from having, and therefore, and I was just saying 35%, I'm not saying I know what the number is. We could do that analysis and then say, listen, 40%, let's say we come up with 40% of our budget is all these costs that fall to everybody. Then we say to them, based on the value of your property, this is what we say the pilot would be. And if you did in-kind services to cover half of it, we're asking you to come up with 20%. So that's, at least then we would create the spreadsheet that would show what we would be asking each one, right?
I think there's a difference between in-kind services and community value. You can take Namcake as an example. I don't know, so they have the pumpkin festival, they have the bright lights, and those are in some sense in-kind services. But really what they have is community attraction as a tourist venue that brings people into the community, and unlike Tanglewood, probably does have some effect on Main Street.
Right, very different scenario, and it's going to be different for each one of them.
I don't know whether one could go to the trustees and get an honest, because the trustees is an organization, they're the folks who own Namcake, and they're an organization that are pan-Massachusetts. And my guess is that they have properties in other places that have pilot programs. And whether one could get an answer from them about how they generally approach the pilot question for their properties.
That's a good suggestion with regard to the trustees, for sure. Same thing with Chesterwood, control the National Trust for Historic Preservation.
Yes, right.
So there are other groups that have national affiliations. Yeah.
I think what I'm hearing here, if I'm hearing anything, is that it would be very productive to know which communities in the Bay State have pilot programs. That's number one. Number two, what are the details of their pilot programs? Number three, the basis for formulation, what municipal services do towns contribute toward these pilot programs? Also, how do these towns formulate a contribution, a pilot contribution? What percentage of these pilots participate, in the Bay State? And how do they arrive at a community valuation? If we get answers from some of these towns, you've got the basis for a plan.
Good point. So, David, I see you're taking notes on what's being said here, and I think
Yes.
that's a good summary.
Yep.
I'm just looking at these records of the last decade. I was stunned at the missing folks.
Well,
Austin Riggs, okay, they're regularly there, and
Cropalo.
Cropalo has been, they quit for the last 2 years, yes.
Right.
But Namcake is missing, the Rockwell Museum is missing, Chesterwood is missing, the Marion Brothers are missing, the Berkshire Botanical Gardens are missing. The theater is missing.
And
The
the
Berkshire
BSO.
Country, BSO, the Berkshire Country Day School is missing against interest, because I'm a director. I will say the SBA is missing, Laurel Hill is missing. And these are all folks who have property that
So
would be
I
of a
think
certain
in
value.
terms of one guideline we had before was that organizations that really just provide open space, that like Laurel Hill, or to some extent the trustees, and like the Stockbridge Land Trust, although they don't own land and fee for the most part, that those really are not going to be targets because, you know, they're already providing such a community benefit. But I do think all the points that we've made here are right on the money. That it is going to involve quite a lot of work. David, I think, you know, you're going to be honest with us,
Yep.
what you can and can't do.
Sure, I'll start to delve into things. I've got a question for Jay. I'm sure I've read about the state having kind of revised their policy on those tax-free lands that they own kind of along the turnpike and such. And Baker had kind of relented and said that the state would kind of pay taxes on those empty lands. How did they value that stuff and how did they come up with the tax to pay to the towns that are involved? Or maybe I'm mistaken on that whole program.
It's so the pilot program for communities, this affected Western Mass really 10 years ago was a serious pilot. Used to be for just open space. So the state comes up with a dollar amount that it will pay out in pilot. And then they look at the assessed value of all the properties that are owned. And then they turn the money over to the communities through the pilot program. What happened about 10 years ago is a bunch of communities said, wait a second, you have buildings in, like DEP in Springfield. So the pilot program was changed about 10 years ago where they started taking the value of municipal buildings. Well, guess what? You can have 300 acres of woodland open space in Stockbridge that's worth, you know, that's not a buildable lot. It's in that where it's only maybe worth a couple $100,000.
Okay.
But Springfield can have a building sitting in the middle of it that's worth 300,000-400,000. So all of a sudden, the pilot got distributed, but it got distributed through this new formula. And the value of properties in cities, especially buildings owned by the state, caused all the pilots of people that just own open space to significantly be reduced.
Okay.
So I think these are good questions. I don't think, you know, dealing with the state is a whole nother subject,
Whole
I
different
think.
pilot.
And I don't think that's really going to be our focus, but it's more, I think, is the equity question that you bring in and transparency and just
Town by town, individual municipalities. You get it from a handful of municipalities, what they do, you know?
but what I'm talking about is the equity among the not-for-profits here.
Right.
And, you know, is it fair that, you know, that Austin Riggs pays fairly generously and other institutions and Norman Rockwell pays nothing or what have you? So I think that's a very important component of getting public support.
I thought one of the strong questions in the questionnaire, I would have worded it a little bit differently, but I thought one of the strong questions in the questionnaire is, as a nonprofit, you have an income stream. It isn't just tickets for events, it's memberships and so forth and so on. As a nonprofit, you have an income stream. How much is that income stream? And to what extent is that something against which, that you could, on which you could put what was in effect
All of that information is publicly available online. We don't even have to ask them. We can look up their financials online.
Yeah, but those financials are available, 501c3 financials.
Right.
They got to produce a public financial,
Good point.
every 501c3.
Yep.
There's a Guide Star program that to provide those results.
So Kripalu, I understand the deal with Kripalu was basically off of that. It
So,
wasn't tickets for events, but how much is coming in to you for your programs over the course?
Oh, yeah, you can go to GuideStar. GuideStar.
So in terms of the agenda, I think we're sort of covering 3, 4, and 5, and also 6. But in terms of our more immediate next steps, I suggest that, we do have a meeting scheduled with the Board of Selectmen. I think one of the first things we might do is to polish up the questionnaire. I wrote a revised draft. Peter has made some suggestions on that draft. So I think maybe the next step would be for Peter and I to, since Peter's been the most proactive, but if anyone wants to look at the 2 drafts, you all have them both. So I suggest that Peter and I come to some kind of consensus on the draft and then present it to you, Roxanne, and you.
Perfect.
No,
Jay?
actually, I think it'd be good.
Yep.
I'm happy to work with you on that. I think I should. But to the extent that Roxanne and Jay have ideas now in relationship to the draft you sent and the draft I sent, we ought to hear before we go to work.
Okay, so do you have any, from looking at the drafts, do you have any
In terms
thoughts
of
or
the
suggestions?
questionnaire, no.
Jay, I think you
Well,
just,
I mentioned them, generically, the points that I outlined. Those are things that we get a feeling from the nonprofits as to how they view these things.
okay.
It would be interesting to know why certain nonprofits give us nothing, i.e. particularly Tanglewood. The rationale is.
There are a lot of politics with
There are a
Tango.
lot of politics.
There was a story that has evolved many years back that the select board at one point in this town or the building department didn't want to approve something for Tanglewood, and it caused a rift. I don't think I have my facts totally right, but something happened where we don't get the same leverage that Lennox has, for example, okay?
Well, one
Something
thing that
happened.
happened was Tanglewood at one point wanted to hook into the Stockbridge sewer system.
There you go.
And there was quite a bit of rift about that. And the select board at the time told Tanglewood, well, if you'll put a conservation restriction on your lakefront property, we can talk. And they said, no, we can't do that.
There it is.
And that was sort of a breaking point in the discussion.
And the
And then
relationship.
for a long
to something.
time,
Right.
they had a tight tank system, and they would have to truck all the sewer almost daily during the busy season down to the Stockbridge wastewater treatment plant. And then years later, they were able to hook up to the Lennox sewer system. But that was one of the several sticking points.
And install flush-free urinals.
So I think we've sort of have our work cut out for us. And I suggest that you've made some notes. If you can, David, if you can get to me the summary of the points, especially the 4 or 5 points that Jay mentioned. And in the meantime,
And David takes care of the minutes?
Sure, the next day or so.
David does the-
I can send them to David. I want to make sure I have his, I have your email.
Okay, yeah, if you could send those, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll do
I think
that.
I have notes, but just in case.
I will be away through midweek, but I'll be back on Wednesday.
I do have one suggestion on question 6 on the questionnaire.
Yeah,
You're assuming that when you answer that question, ask the question about the similarities to Boston's policies, you're assuming that these nonprofits, especially the ones that aren't BSO, are knowledgeable about the Boston program. So you're opening up yourself to having to explain what the Boston program is to these people who don't understand that.
So
Are you
I
talking
think that's
about
something
Tom's
that
draft or mine?
Peter and I can discuss, and
Okay.
in my edition of the questionnaire, it spelled out very broadly some of the provisions.
Okay,
I had that in the questionnaire. Peter had described the Boston thing in the opening, but I think informed by this discussion, these are things that we can work out.
okay.
Can you have, David, would you be able to find out what other towns have a formal pilot program?
Yeah, I'll look at that.
I think most of them have failed other than, I don't know if Worcester's, there are pilot programs, but as far as a formal pilot program, there are very few.
There are, yeah.
Yeah, I believe what, like Boston, Northampton, it maybe Williamstown, but I'm not even sure about that.
No, Williamstown does not have a,
Worcester.
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 Then it's real limited. There aren't many.
So I see, Jamie, you're getting ready to, do you have any questions? Just here to listen.
Do you
Well,
want to be a select person on the,
that's not for us to be asking right now.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
So I do have a question, though.
Yeah.
This is the first meeting since this group was reappointed, and typically the first order of business is reorganization.
Well, I think we went through that when we reconvened when we reconvened earlier this year. But if you feel we should have I don't think this is our first meeting this year. We're still on.
Since the last appointment cycle, yeah, it is.
Well-
So I was just curious, and I was curious because at one point I know in the past year you were not sure that you wanted to continue with this, and so I just wondered, did you want to continue as the chair?
Well, that's a very good question, Roxanne. I do have a lot on my plate, for sure. So let's put it this way, I'm willing to serve another term. I don't think I would want to serve beyond this current fiscal year, beyond June, but if somebody else is interested, I would willingly step aside.
Okay, are either of you gentlemen interested?
or are you
I'm not.
interested?
No, I'm not. No. Or, I mean, another possibility is we could have a co-chair. We could have co-chairs.
We could do
In
that
the event that
too.
it gets to be too much, if you have a co-chair or someone can't be here, we could probably still meet and have discussion. It's we're a small group.
It's definitely a possibility.
I'm new and I have no other official connection to town business. And if those aren't obstacles, I'd be willing to do it. But I think it probably might be better. I mean, and Jay, you.
Yeah, but there's just so many things that I could do for the town.
Yeah, Jay's
You know,
already
I
pretty busy.
Just don't have enough time.
Right.
And me
So
too,
I think, Roxanne, what you make is a very good point, and I would suggest that we get the thumbs up from the select board this coming meeting and have that at the top of the agenda for the first meeting after.
Who scheduled this meeting with the select board? Or did they schedule it for us?
I think,
I mean, we talked about this maybe a long time ago. I'm wondering if we have enough time to actually pull something cogent together.
I don't think we have to pull something detailed together. I think in my opinion, what we want to do is to get an affirmation from the select board that they're behind us. And for me,
Well, they've appointed us.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, they do.
Yes, but we have a
Has to
new board
presume-
now and there's.
No, that new board appointed this group. Jamie was there. Jamie is a witness. Jamie was there. The new board appointed this group.
In the summer,
Okay.
we did that.
Pardon?
In the summer, we went through all the committees and boards.
Yeah,
It's done annually.
I think it'd be useful to, because we made a noise about, well, we're not doing anything for the moment because of COVID. I think something brief telling the select board, okay, we met last Thursday, CTSB TV was there. If you can hear from Jamie and hear from Mike if you want to. But we just wanted you to know that we're back in business and we'll be working hard. I'm not sure it's necessary to do much more than that.
Right. yeah.
Right, I think.
State the presence, state the intention. moving
I
forward.
agree with what you said, but in terms of chairs, co-chairs, I'm more than happy to, Jay, is your opinion we should do that now or after the meeting with the select board?
I would, I may be overstepping my bounds, but I would propose a co-chairmanship with you and Roxanne.
I don't know that I have time. Peter, do you have time to co-chair this group?
I would have time, but again, I'm very much less well-known to the town.
Well, you don't need to be well-known to co-chair. So if you're willing to do it, I would make a motion that we name Peter as co-chair. Because I certainly don't have time.
Well, what do you think?
Do we have a second? I made a motion.
I'd second it.
Okay,
I'm not going to vote.
motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion?
I think we need a call for a vote.
Call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 There you
A
go.
Thank
vote.
you. Okay.
Done. Do we need everybody with the selectmen next week?
No.
Fine.
And we don't have to meet with the select board. I think Roxanne made a suggestion that maybe it's not needed.
I agree with Peter. I agree with Peter's response in that I think it makes sense to go in front of them. Yes, we have met on such and such a date.
Yeah.
Here's how we're moving forward. Sure.
And we have a co-chairmanship relationship moving forward. And by the way, some of the things that we're looking at are some of these bullet points that David is going to, pull together, and we will be back in touch.
Okay.
How's that?
That's fine. Just one other item, in terms of a fifth member. We had talked that Bronley Boyd might be in a position to be useful as a business person who's very well familiar with town business, as someone who's been on a number of assignments for the town.
And on a number of boards.
Pardon?
And on a number of boards.
And in a number of boards. So would it,
Well, if Bronley is interested in serving, then the normal routine would be for him to contact the select board and say that he would be interested in serving on the pilot committee.
okay, well, back when it came up before, I talked with the members and said that I thought that he would be a good person to talk to. I did talk to him during the summer. He said, well, right now I'm just totally busy, but if you are serious about this, you can get back to me in the fall. So I think,
But formally, when people are interested, they basically do a communique with the select board.
yeah,
And the town
in his
administrator.
case, he's not going to volunteer that. that's a guaranteed. I mean, it would take some persuasion for me to say, we could really use your help. And then you'll say, would you be I need to, just in terms of this particular situation.
Well, I mean, should we be asking? I think basically it should just go out to the public, and the select board could certainly address this in terms of, we would like to see at least one more member on the pilot committee. Is anyone interested? And solicit public input and see who is interested.
Well, that gets to be a complicated process.
I would be more comfortable with you following up with Brownlee Boyd to see if there's an interest level. And by the way, we select board would like to expand the membership and have Brownlee participate. Is there a problem with this? There won't be a problem with this. I think he's a great.
Well, he's excellent, but it sounds like he was hesitant to volunteer, so.
He was on the committee when we picked Eric
One of the
up.
greatest
He's terrific.
committees that we had, he's wonderful.
Yeah.
But it sounds like from what you're saying that you're gonna have to twist his arm to get
Well,
him to
he
do
said,
it, maybe.
get back to me. So I think, I think if we proceed as Jay just
It'd be
suggested.
great if Brownlee was here.
Okay. All right. So is there any other new business?
David, I will send these bullet points to you and I'll copy everybody else.
That'd be great, thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
One comment on the select board, I mean, and they need to know that there's somebody going on, and they need to be able to tell people that they're not going to discuss it, but that it needs to be, needs to be directly with this committee. So there's no confusion or waffling about what the direction is or how this is getting approached. Because if things work there the way they do here, those business people are going to be contacting the select board directly to lobby for whatever position they're in. And it's not the select board's, or supposedly not the select board's duty to be negotiating this thing or to be providing opinions on it if this committee is really in charge.
No, the select board do the appointments in this town.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's the normal procedure.
They're not going to have an issue with a guy like Brownlee
No,
Boyd.
of course not.
It's un-American. It's
no,
un-American.
not as far as I'm speaking about the ability to make comments or to kind of voice opinions on where the pilot committee is going, what their process is, or what the end goal is. Should be directly addressed to the pilot committee and not with the select board. They may have other opinions or different opinions than what the pilot committee has.
Okay.
Maybe I'm not being clear there.
So I think, of course, you're all welcome to attend the meeting. I would actually encourage you, David, to attend it virtually or to watch the tape so that we'll have a good sense of where we're at.
Yeah.
And we'll proceed accordingly.
This is next Thursday at 7?
6:30.
6:30? Okay. And which doors are open?
The front middle door should be open and the back door is always open.
So at 3:58, I'm pretty sure I'm right about this, the front middle door was locked.
Then I will make sure that it is open to 4. And
So,
I was here down here. Usually I make sure that door is open for the selectmen's meeting. When I came down to sit here, it was open. So I'm not sure who locked it.
So thank you all. And I know
Excellent.
we're all very busy. And it's just so that you all know, this is going to be a real stretch for me because professionally I have a lot of.
I think it's a stretch for all of us.
So it's a stretch for all of us.
Right.
If we can
As-
collaborate as best as possible, this would be really good. And
One advantage you have in me is that I do not have a whole lot of stuff on my plate other than the family history and the talk I'm supposed to give in December.
Well, there you go.
good
Sounds
to hear,
interesting.
Peter. Okay,
Okay.
thanks, everybody.
All righty.
Thank you.
And a big
Motion to adjourn.
See you guys.
second.
Second.
Meeting adjourned.
Don't be offended if I'm not there next Thursday.